Hey everyone, this is Imanee Mamalushin, and I'm here on the East Coast with River all the way in New Mexico and getting ready to do some hemping out there. And we're really excited to bring on a guest and one of our partners that actually is one of the suppliers of hemp, Randy from Formation Ag. So I'm going to hand it over to you, River, to introduce Randy and tell people a little bit about the future of hemp.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. As you all know, I'm hugely advocating for hemp in the industry now, in the building industry, and connected with Randy. Maybe it's over a year now, I think, that we first connected, and I went to visit them in their location in Colorado and saw what they were doing with the processing machinery required to turn hemp stalks, biomass into the building materials that we are using in this new, healthy, natural home building industry. It's a point in time I've been really looking forward to being in the industry for a couple of decades now, and just wondering how, Randy, if you introduce yourself, and I would like to hear how you got into hemp actually, like what got you there? What was your background that led you to hemp?
I'm not sure how long we've got. We talk forever about that part. My name is Randy Wright. I work with Formation Ag. I'm the general manager and sales manager now of Formation Ag. I got involved in the hemp industry as an economic developer about 7 years ago when marijuana became legal in Colorado. Hemp was definitely a product on the horizon for us. And as an economic developer, I saw it as a way for farmers to add a cash crop to their repertoire and actually be able to add value to that crop before it left our area, because none of the services had been or were available. There was no decorticators. There was nothing like that. And none of the processing was available. And I saw it as a way for the farmers to be able to add that to the value of their crops before they even sent it out of our area. So as an economic development person, that was a big deal, being able to bring more money into our area before it left. We do a lot of potatoes and grain in our area, and people make potato chips and vodka, but it's somewhere outside our area that they make those things, so we don't get that value add here. I saw hemp as a possible chance of adding that value before it left our area. And then after a few years, I was somewhat responsible for getting Corbett Hefner involved with Power Zone. He, after he got there, started working in the hemp industry, somewhat to my suggestion. And when they came to me asking how they could diversify the Power Zone business structure, which was primarily refurbishing large industrial gas pumps, mostly for the oil and gas industry, which was in a slump at the time, I told them, obviously, we need help with hemp. And they said, yeah, we understand that, but our owner's Mennonite. I said, yeah, I had thought about that. Well, a couple of weeks later, they got back together with the owner, and he asked them what they were thinking. And he said, well, we're thinking hemp. And he said, me too, let's do it. So they started then as Power Zone Agriculture, made a decorticator, the first decorticator that I know of that was made in the United States since the 30s, built on the Schlichten design. Found a lot of interesting challenges that Schlichten, I don't think accidentally put into his design in the patents. I think they were on purpose to kind of throw people off. But we've been able to get around those things. They sent that first decorticator to Russia. It's still there and operating well. They just called us a couple of weeks ago and asked if we could send them another one. So we're happy to do so. And then after that, they started in other things, working on the CBD side, collecting chaff out of a combine for low CBD crops and developing harvesters to harvest the CBD without rupturing trichomes, which was a big deal. And then obviously, as the CBD industry has really tanked, we've started switching over our business to the industrial side again and really developing the decortication system.
Randy, can I
Yes.
jump in there for a minute for people who
Sure.
are new to hemp? Because one of the things that, I have a hemp business focused on the CBD, right, and sublingual aspect and consumption. A lot of people don't understand the difference between the two, the industrial hemp. So I think if you can speak to that, that would be really helpful for the listeners, because everybody says to us as we're traveling around, like, oh, I have a field, you can grow lots of hemp. So I want to kind of demystify for the people new to this, but who have heard about hemp, but have a lot of different ideas in their mind of what it is versus what it really is from your process, and even what the machines in the processing is required to break it down into usable form.
So you're exactly right. The two are completely different. Generally speaking, the way we're taught to farm hemp, I generally break them out and say that we grow CBD and we farm industrial, in two very different processes completely. CBD generally is thought of as being big bushy plants. And those big bushy plants and the whole idea of the horticultural style of growing CBD came from the marijuana industry, where we're growing inside, whether it be in greenhouses or basements for a long time. And so people in the marijuana industry know very well how to get the most out of a plant in that horticultural style, but it doesn't transfer very well when you move it outside. Things like weeds become a real issue. And so just the cultivation of the CBD plant becomes somewhat of a challenge. And in a lot of areas, especially in our area, we've evolved to growing CBD on 6.5-inch centers. In other words, 6.5 inches between plants, instead of 50 or 60 inches between plants. Well, you're obviously not going to get a big bushy plant when you do that. But it becomes a farmed plant. It becomes an agricultural aspect for the farmer now, instead of the horticultural, which most of them aren't used to. And by doing that, the CBD elevates towards the top of the stalk, top 2 or 3 feet. And we've got a couple of different harvesters that can harvest that material and leave the stalk in the field. That stalk can then be cut or swathed, left in the field to rot, which is an important process of the industrial side. And then it can be baled and brought in to be decorticated. So we've literally found a way to get flower, seed, and fiber and hurt off of the same plant. It's not perfect by any means, but we're getting much closer every year. So we're kind of trying to bridge that gap that you talked about between CBD and industrial. Typically, the CBD plants are the big bushy plants, and you've got to have some way of harvesting those big bushy plants, and then bucking those plants to take the CBD material off of them and then go into processing. Typically, that's a feminized plant that doesn't get pollinated, or at least that's the theory. There are a lot of hermaphrodites in hemp that cause pollination, and there are some males that come out even in feminized seed. So it's a bit of a challenge that hemp farmers have dealt with since the beginning. But what we're doing now with our industrial type plants is that we're actually planting males. We're not worrying about that. Good morning, Mike. Welcome.
Nice to have you here, Mike.
I'm late. I was on a call that was supposed to take 20 minutes and it went an hour and 10 minutes.
Well, we're just glad you're here. Randy's just breaking down some of the myths of hemp, and I love that distinction, Randy, between the farming and the, horticultural aspect, because, even some of the messages and people say all the time, like, I have land, can I grow it? And then even if they were to grow it and knew how to grow it in these different ways that you just described, the other piece is that they don't understand that it actually has to be processed, and that the processing requires these big machines that you're talking about, the fortification, right? Those machines. So and as River had said, we're kind of pioneering this industry using industrial hemp in this way, particularly for the building. We've been familiarized with it with CBD for the last couple of years since hemp got deregulated, but this is a new industry. I mean, on the horizon. It's just getting started, even though maybe you saw it before others. But what's your projection, and where do you think this is going?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, obviously, our biggest. Are you calling me? I've got a phone call coming in from you.
From me?
Yes. I'll shut that off. Okay. Anyway, No, the future of the industry. Let me get back my train of thought back. That kind of disrupted me a little bit. Obviously, our business philosophy has changed over to the industrial side significantly now, and we see obviously, the advocates will say there's 25,000 uses for the hemp plant. Most of those are in the stock, in the fiber in the herd. And before you can actually realize most of those, you have to have them decorticated. Our vision of the future is that the hemp stock, the fiber in the herd, are going to be the future of hemp. Does that mean that CBD is going to go away? Absolutely not. There was an article written about 2 or 3 months ago that suggested that if on the current usages of CBD right now, 1,500 milligrams per bottle, about 3,000 acres would satisfy the needs of CBD in the whole nation. I think that's a little bit low, but I don't think it's all that unrealistic to think that we're way over producing right now. And with that being the case, we're going to have to come to some standardization where we're producing the amount we need. At the same time, we need some education as far as what CBD does. And unfortunately, the United States is holding that back a little bit. We're not allowing a lot of those things without significant amounts of money to prove it. The rest of the world is doing it. I've got 3 studies done in Britain that are very encouraging about cancer and the effects of high dosages of CBD and THC and all of the other different cannabinoids involved and their effects on cancer. Really interesting stuff, but that stuff's not being done in the United States at this time. So it's going to be difficult for a while, but we do need that research to prove as much as we can at the university level, whatever the case may be, that there may be some very strong health benefits in CBD. If it's just treated like a vitamin, I'm good with that. But that's where I see CBD going. But I think the future is definitely in the fiber and the herd. The herd industry has developed already. There are a lot of different uses for the herd, including hempcrete, which we're very excited to be working with you guys on. That's been a big deal, and it has reinforced some of the things that we're doing. The fiber, we've gotten some really good information out of Canada about our fiber now. I think we need to do a little bit better job of maintaining all of the fiber in the plant. We're losing a little bit in the trash stream, but once we get that figured out, our fiber is very, very nice fiber, 14 to 16 thousandths in diameter and very clean, very nice and open. It's really good stuff. Of course, that depends on the variety and a whole bunch of other things too, but hopefully that answered your question.
Yay. Thanks, Randy. Yeah, totally. I mean, I think there's a lot of confusion in general around, like I travel around and obviously working with hemp and building, and people say, oh, I know someone who's got tons of biomass, tons of, from the CBD or from cannabis industry, and just understanding that it's not a one shoe fits all kind of thing where, the plant has got so many variants and strains, and maybe that's a good time to bring you in, Mike, just to get you introduce yourself maybe a little bit, and how you came to hemp, and what kind of way you see hemp right now on the industrial side. I know you're connected in the CBD side of things, but on the industrial side, I think there's a lot happening with the indigenous cultures, and looking potentially to grow on their land, and maybe you can speak a little bit to that, because I know that's something that's been of interest to you. Hey.
Well, my home, and I own a company called Botanically Living Solutions, and we are engaging and working with multiple tribes around the country to go in and do large hemp grows. And their primary idea of the market is going to be in industrial hemp, not just in CBD. So some of them want to do CBD, some of them want to do just completely industrial hemp, because they see the market as being bigger right now. So if you look at the basics of the CBD market, where we're at, and Randy mentioned about the tinctures, that volume, but that's just a little teeny component of what's inside the market, right? So a lot of the huge amounts, I mean, I'm working on a contract right now where we potentially are going to move 1,000 kilos a week of CBD isolate to other manufacturers that are just, their sole purpose is to make Delta 8 out of it. And then Delta 8 is just a variant of a CBD that it's a psychoactive product that has a lot of medicinal uses for it. So, that's a huge piece of it. And so the market is actually growing in structure and size of how and what the CBD and hemp are going to be used for, right? So,
Mike, is that website the botanicalsolutioncbd.com? Is that the one? Is that yours?
Yes.
Okay. And then, remember when we first talked, with River and I, when we first met, we were talking, you were like, the industrial hemp is coming, fiber's coming, you know all these farmers growing it, but you're like, we're not sure when that timeline is, if we're there. Like, where do you think we are in that timeline right now?
Well, with the introduction of people like you guys, all of you, it's growing, right? And it's growing to that market. And the thing that could happen, just like it did with CBD, is that, people hear about this market and all of a sudden they go, and every farmer in the world, tears out their corn and their soy and starts growing industrial hemp. And then it floods the market, changes it, and then people go bankrupt, and then people buy out those farms. And, just the exact same thing we've seen in the hemp market over the last year and a half, 2 years. Which is unfortunate, but it's a free market, right? And that's all capitalism. People go in business for a reason, and it is to make money and to produce stuff. So as we grow the different availabilities for the products to be moved to, the market could explode. I mean, I think the market's already there. And like we've had that discussion before, River, is that the market's there. It's our job to educate people that is the market and that there is a market for it. And so we have, I've got one of my primary growers that has, he does CBD hemp and he does cannabis, and he does it in a few different spots throughout California and a few other states. And we talked about the industrial hemp, and he says it's nowhere near mature enough to be able to start doing any kind of acreage at all, because you don't have the flow. And you have to have the sale for it before you grow it, or there's no purpose for it. So fortunately for industrial hemp, it doesn't degrade like a flower, like a hemp flower would, right? With the CBD and the cannabinoids leaving that flower over time and heat, and depending on how you maintain and hold it. So with that, we have that on our side. So I mean, if there's a lot of hemp that's grown for industrial purposes, and you remove the herd and the fiber, and you do the things that are necessary for it, it's a lot easier to store and maintain large stockpiles of it to be able to grow to market. So that's one thing that's going for it, because the other crops, people are throwing away crops. I had a farmer reach out to a friend of mine asking us if we could take like 120,000 pounds of hemp for free, because he was tired of storing it in his building and he needed room for other stuff. And we were working on that deal, and then he actually found another rancher who had cattle, and he sold it to him for hog feed. So that's one of the places it can go, and different things, and for cattle feed. So, and there's that market it's saturated right now with growers particularly, and then it's saturated because a lot of the growers, because they had nowhere to take their product to, they started getting to manufacturing. So they're manufacturing products, and then that distillate is sitting on the shelf all over the place. The isolate's sitting on the shelf all over the place until the Delta 8 market came in place, and that kind of revitalized that piece of it. But that market's adjusting very quickly. We saw prices of distillate just a year and a half ago at $2,000 a kilo, and today you can get it for $500 a kilo or less. So we don't want to see the same thing happen in the industrial hemp market, where it's overflowed and people have stockpiles of millions of pounds of herd and fiber in their backyard, right? So it's about education to the market. That's what we need to do. That's our job. We want to see this market grow. We want to be a part of the market. It's about educating the contractors, the building industry, and all the different places we can put this, because it doesn't just go to those two markets. There's so many other things that can be done with it. So
I think there's so many uses to this plant. I think that's the amazing thing about it, right? I mean, getting into plastics and textiles, into composites, into pretty much everything that, just finding out that these ancient cave temples in India were plastered with hemp and lime that lasted in just in perfect condition for however, they can't even date these places.
Awesome. I'm gonna have to research that. You send me something on that. That's so amazing.
Yeah, well, Abby, who's on our team, who's a Vastu, who works in the Vastu, he's a Vastu temple designer from a lineage, and
A generation, a lineage of builders.
yeah, and
Oh,
in the Vastu tradition, they're very interested in the energetics of material because their structures are energy devices, essentially healing energy devices. And that's for me what makes this plant amazing. It's there is so many uses to it, but there's a energy and a frequency to this plant, and the connections that people make through this plant. There's so much that I think there's on the etheric side of things, on the spiritual side of things, there's something very sacred about this plant. And I think there is a delicate balance between bringing something into the mainstream and wanting to bring that back to so people can have it in their lives again, whether it's CBD or your homes or whatever it is. But at the same time, there's a nervousness about it getting kind of turned into this kind of mechanized, industrialized system owned, essentially by, let's say, these big corporations, these Monsanto type of companies.
Right.
And what I see in the industry is that it's people like Randy are producing these machines that can do the work, but the amount of machines we need to get around the country, and like you said, like educating the farmers and all these guys to understand that there's a real business in this, and not only that, but what it's doing for the soil. I mean, looking at that, like in terms of what the plant is really doing as a proponent for a positive future, that's a really big question for me. Like, how do you see hemp as being part of a new timeline that's evolving, where it's kind of becoming more decentralized? How do you see? Maybe Randy, you could answer to this a little bit, because I know you're getting machines out to different areas. Like, how do you see that if let's say this existing system of things is falling away and then these new systems are coming into place? How does hemp play a part in that? What do you feel? I know we've conversed on this in several times.
You kind of asked about three questions there, so I'll figure out what's the best way to go with this as I move forward. But I think one of the biggest challenges that you hit on is that there aren't enough machines out there to handle the market that's building. And it's building quickly. And Mike, you're exactly right. We've got some challenges in that. But it can't build. It's kind of a chicken egg thing. The industries can't build before we can produce the products. And so that's been somewhat of a challenge for us. If you think about it, we're in an industry. It's a new industry with a new machine trying to sell equipment to startup companies. And the biggest challenge that we have is getting those startup companies financed. So unless they've got some kind of a leg to stand on in their history, that they can go to some kind of financing company or local bank and get financed for this $1 million machine, by the time you've got some a place to put it and so on, at least it's going to be that kind of money. It's very difficult to build the industry very fast, but that's what we really need. I think the industry is ready for it. We've talked a lot about the biomass that's available out there for processing. One of the biggest challenges with that biomass you've mentioned, the CBD biomass, is all but useless typically in terms of decortication. You can use extremely large wood chippers or hammer mills and combines and things like that. There's people that are doing that kind of thing in large volume, but the herd that's created is not very clean, and the fiber is a rat's nest. It's not very usable. So even though that's a good possibility for helping us prime the pump and getting the industry started, it doesn't really satisfy the general and the quality needs that we need in the industry. So we need more of the actual decorticators out there on the industry, producing long line fiber that works for textiles, and the herd that can be used very well, not only in hempcrete, but animal bedding and some of the other things that we've mentioned, plastics and so on. And in order to do the plastics, it has to be extremely clean. They don't want any fiber in it at all. And then it has to be pulverized. And we can take that down to 100 micron size now, and they're using it for exploration in plastics, which is awesome. They're not getting very far. But it's, like I say, it's that chicken egg thing. I've got a really good friend though, that I worked with in economic development, and he used to say, chicken, egg, chicken, egg, chicken, egg. Why don't we just build a nest? And so that's really, what we're trying to do. Let's build the nest and see what happens, what hatches here. And
Build
that's
the
really
nest
what
with
we're
hemp,
doing.
Randy. You're gonna
What's
build the nest with hemp.
Exactly.
Mike, I just want to come back to one of the things Mike talked about, because I know we've come across a lot of the indigenous groups, and you've been working with them, Mike, that are growing on the land, and how we're looking at bringing that so that this stays in the hands of the people, because we often know good things get into the wrong hands sometimes. How do you see us being able to navigate through this future journey of hemp and be able to, because this plant for me, I mean, the cannabis consciousness that's emerging around the globe is really elevating humanity. And River, you touched on that kind of the etheric spiritual part of this plant. Like, I do think it's here to help us evolve. And how do we do that in a way that is, from a place of integrity?
Yeah, so it's slowly, right? To do like that's it has to be slowly and methodically put out and put in place with integrity. And then when you deal with the tribes across the country, they're different than dealing with the normal public, right? By far. And the partnerships that are grown, if you do it properly and you do it with the right people and they put you in there, you become family, right, with them, rather than just a business transaction. And we're about, and with what we're doing, it's full ownership with the tribes. It's creating jobs with the tribes. It's creating education with the tribes and with the people that are working in it. And the industries are, so broad based on what they're looking at. So what you'll find is most of the tribes don't want to put up any money. They want to put up land, and they want to be able to have the tribal members hired to be able to be help in labor and education and that kind of stuff. So it's done. Every tribe is different. They have the ability to do their own bylaws. And you'll see, like in one of the tribes we're doing is in South Dakota, and they have South Dakota recently allowed hemp and cannabis this last year to be able to be produced there. So that as they work through their laws and they actually put out the state law that's allowed, their agreement, then the tribes can get on board and do their stuff. And then all the tribe has to really do is change some of the documents inside of there. They just need to make it legal inside the tribe. So they write up a document for it, and then it becomes tribal law. So they're allowed to do that inside the tribe. And then you structure it with the tribe to where if it's going to be a co-ownership, they can either have an ownership with it. If you do anything at all, it's all owned by them, but then you do management agreements. And then the management agreement allows you to keep the cash flow managed, and then also then pay them a percentage. And you put all this up in the contracts first. And it's tribe to tribe is different, and they all have their own ideas and ways and structure and how to do it. And the best way to get with them is typically not just to go and approach the tribe, unless you already have somebody that's in the tribe that's working and doing stuff with the tribe. And that's how we've gotten all these, is with people who have had, been working with tribes for 30, 40 years and developed family type relationships. And one of the guys that I'm working with is his mom and dad, something happened, I think, and it was his stepdad lived on a tribe in Southern California, and he basically adopted him, and he grew up on tribal lands in Southern California, and he's become part of the tribe. And with that, and then he has been able to maintain and grow other relationships with other tribes, around the country. And he's successful at it because he has this base, right? And he's a great person and a base influence to talk to and help do that stuff. And there's a lot of people out there that are like that. They do business with tribes, have for a long time. The tribes are very leery of people that aren't those people and or members, because effectively they've been, screwed over for many, many years, right? And so they're leery. They're very cautious about doing business outside of the tribe and to get new stuff in there. But they also understand that there's revenue to be made in different things, and they're always willing to hear stuff. So it's a pretty good deal, a good force to go to tribes in tribal land. Typically, they always have good water rights. They're on a river. A lot of tribes are right on water. and which helps out. And then you don't have to mess around with, buying water or getting fined for it or, other issues and problems. So there's a lot of benefits to doing that on there. So and you have your regular farms across the nation.
Right.
I was going to say, River, that's a perfect segue to talk about the next step. Once we've grown the hemp, once we've processed the hemp, what we're doing with the hemp as far as the building and the natural building course with hemp that we're creating and focusing on Indigenous and youth to create the workforce, because we're going to need that as well. So maybe you want to speak to that, River.
Yeah, well, that's definitely it, isn't it? I mean, I think we all touched on it. The educational side of this is, it's in that ignorance that things don't happen. I mean, we don't want to go there. We have fear of it because we don't know. We have, presumptions and all kinds of things. And, like I look at it like I'm a designer, but I can only design and build so many houses a year personally. And to affect real change is actually, how do we give the power back to the people? How do we use, I'm running workshops on 1 day workshops to teach people about hemp building. It's that simplified. It's not some rocket science futuristic kind of building technique. It's actually brings us back to kind of more hands-on community barn raising type of things. And I think in the we're building our course so we can help people get educated, and we'll have some projects where we have people come on and do apprenticeship programs, and we're looking for land to do that, and open to partnerships in a way that would be interested to do that. Maybe that is even on Indigenous lands. Maybe there's some opportunity in that way to bring that, because I think from my understanding, the Indigenous peoples have a strong relationship with fiber, and the fiber arts. It's a big part of the culture. But hemp heard for building is probably pretty new to them. The idea of it, are they open to that element? Do you find with hemp, or are they really kind of staying with what they know in terms of the fiber side of it? And is there room for education there that will shift that? Sure.
So I actually had so there's the guy that I know knows the guy who's been the economic development person for the board for the tribe in South Dakota for like 30 years. And he's been the chairperson for this. And then they have farmland, a lot of it. And then they have about 35,000 acres in corn right now. And he's managed that for a long time. And they actually approached me to look at the feasibility of doing fiber industrial hemp right there on that site. So with that being said, yes, I think the availability, anything that we can bring in there to help them, and I mentioned education, to educate them to be able to do, because it creates jobs, right? And if they had a plant on site, and then we're there with the plant, and we have an educational system there, and we're training them, then it just goes from there to wherever, right? So it's going to go from there to everywhere. So yes, absolutely 100%.
Mike, with that, because right now we know we're building out the new economy, and there's new business structures. And I know you've gotten really involved with Renegade Ranch, and actually we're the ones that I first heard about the PMA, the Private Membership Association, and how we're setting up. And when you were talking about the contracts on these Indigenous lands, it was just having me think about this new business structure with the 508, which is what River and I set up with Haven Earth Ministries as a 508 and a PMA. But I think particularly with those growing hemp, this business structure would be really important to know about. And it still is fairly new to most people. So maybe if you could speak to that for a minute and what you're doing with that.
You bet. So the PMA, a Private Membership Association, is the structure of the future, right? It's a business entity. And it's how we're getting away from being isolated and being controlled by government, right? So it takes... And you deal with your own customers, and they're basically your own members. So you're not in the public domain anymore, you're in the private domain. And that allows you to conduct business without any authority of the state. And when I say state, I mean federal, state, and local government. So things can happen faster. You don't need permits, you don't need use permits, you don't need anything at all to be able to structure your business and to be able to work that business through any kind of business you want. Currently, we're helping healthcare, education, and food sovereignty are probably the three biggest areas we're doing this in. The fastest because of the mandated vaccinations that are sweeping across the country, and people don't want to get it, and they want to do it, and they're losing their jobs. And a PMA can help them not have to be vaccinated and mandate that their people are vaccinated. And I think that's the strength and the speed right now. It's a shame at our local school here last week, there was a team of people walking around on the campus vaccinating children without parental consent. And
that's a whole other topic, Mike, but but very important, because these business structures are giving us, well, I mean, they've been around, but we didn't have that knowledge. And now that people are really getting that on their hands, for many reasons, they're looking to do that. And that would be one of them. I know you're helping people now with the PMAs. Do you have a specific website, or how can people get in touch with you?
Yes, it's my website's thepmateam.club. .club. Yep. My email address is mike@thepmateam.club. And you can reach out to me anytime you want to. Go to those. My phone number is 916-799-6885. And you can text me, call me anytime, reach out to my website. I've got some videos on there. And then there's going to be a bunch of literature that's going to be posted on there very soon. We're trying to work on that today. So
yeah.
I see Randy's are taking over there. Sounds interesting.
The strength and the power of our PMA, it allows you to conduct business with your members and keeping the authority outside of and meddling with your business. And it actually brings the doing business back to being exciting and fun rather than being regulated and over-regulated. There's a place for our government and there's a place for regulation. But today isn't what it was meant to be, and we need to be free of that. And this allows us to do that. So
absolutely. So important, because we need as many PMAs and those PMAs working together to do business. This is very similar to how we're setting up these partnerships with all of you. I mean, there's that's the model that we're building out, and the PMA is going to help us move that to further expand
our new community, right? And then so on my website also currently I'm building a PMA directory, and so just go on my website, go into the services page, and then into the contacts page, and then just fill in your information and just say you want to be a part of that directory, and then we're going to get that directory up. I'm hoping to have.
Thank you, Mike. I was hoping I didn't have to do that, so I'm so appreciative that you're doing that.
It's like I was hoping I didn't have to do it either, but and then I thought about the absolute 100% right thing to do, and I'm tired of waiting for somebody else to do it. Right, and that's how it goes. You want it done, just do it. And so this is a pretty painless way for me to be able to do this. And we're going to separate it from state and then from industry, healthcare, education, food sovereignty, and then I'll have an other side. And then the other side is where hemp and cannabis goes and every other business in the country, right? So that's anybody can be a PMA for the most part. Some businesses are a little tougher to be able to figure out how it's going to work because there's regulations to work around. So we set up different things, different ways, but it's amazing vehicle. It really is.
Yeah. How does that affect the indigenous population? Because I know, like on tribal land, they're making their own laws anyway. So does that apply to the indigenous?
As far as the PMA, you're inside their laws all the way through it in what you're doing. One of the things we do when we do contracts is we have them waive their sovereignty, just to make sure that they can't take your stuff away and or take over your money or all that. So, and that's just, it's been developed in the contracts and it works well and they accept it. So it works out just fine. But the PMA is to protect you from the federal, state, local government, and the tribes for the most part aren't affected by that anyway. So.
Yeah, I definitely see this kind of decentralized system and I've been feeling this for a long time, probably like you guys, that it's going to be in the future. It's going to be about these agricultural areas that are going to become the hubs, where we're decentralizing, getting back to growing our food is one of the primary things. I think. I mean, at the end of the day, hemp is a food. I mean, and is Evan, who's part of our team, Evan Folds, he likes to say, like, hemp is the is a gateway plant to growing our food again, to our right relationship with our food. And it's really interesting because like the way we come at growing hemp and cannabis is quite sacred, but the way we grow our food is quite, you know, we're not even growing it basically.
Right.
We're buying it and thinking it's healthy even when we go to the organic stores, but realizing that the food's wrapped in plastic and it's been dead for weeks. So it's like when we create these decentralized zones, I can just see, you know, Randy's machine all over, like dotted all over the place, and then, you know, connecting with people like you and opening up that market with the local farmers, and getting the access to funding. You know, that's another thing. Like I've been working down here in the Mora area, and that they're, you know, Randy's been down here as well, and the idea of bringing in the economic development people and looking to get grants and stuff like that. My question would be actually is about that. When we bring in these kind of things to get grants and government support, are we kind of creating a problem in the future, you think, or is there another way to do this where it's back in the hands of the people, where we're raising funds, we're doing this in another way that allows us to sidestep having to get the government kind of, as soon as they give you a grant, then you're like on the, you know, you're on their sites, you know, so.
Yeah. So that's, and you hit it right in the head. As soon as you get a grant, then you're in their pocket. And I would advise not to go for grants. And if you're a PMA, you can't really apply for a grant anyway, because you work in the public realm, not in the private. I mean, you work in the private, not public. So you wouldn't be able to do that. So you'd have to somehow have a grant system set up with a public business, and then be able to build something. And it intertwines it too much. And the thing is that if anything has to rely on a grant, then it's really not sustainable, right? So that's one of the things that I used to develop biomass plants, and we didn't really need a grant for those. And then when you're doing solar today, you still need a grant to do those. And so a lot of people think, is solar really sustainable? Because you have to have, you know, federal, state money to make it work inside of a legitimate return on investment, right? So, I mean, it works and it does if you buy it, but just how long does it take to pay off without that grant? And it's getting better, right, as it should. And that was their whole intent on it. But yeah, if it doesn't have a grant, it's more sustainable. And I think you build better community when you don't have the government involved in that process.
Yeah. Do you, what's your take on that, Randy? And like, I know that you've had some machines. I know you're getting one of your machines into, I think, in tribal lands even. And then another I know that I'm working with, who are producing herd out in Kansas. And they're creating them hubs. Are these just private entities that are getting funding sourcing, or is it other ways? Oh, you're muted.
Randy, see if you can unmute yourself. There you go.
There you go.
Sorry. Imanee had been taking care of that for me. I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry. So I guess the first thing is that PMAs to me have always been positive mental attitude. I think that's probably goes along with this, ironically, but so I don't know a lot about that. But as far as the indigenous and the people that we're working with, it has been just private money. Indigenous money, I don't, you know, like Mike says, they're kind of tight. They don't let a lot of information out unless it needs to be, and that's fine. It's not a problem for me. But I don't know exactly where their funding is coming from, but I'm sure it's tribal money, and we're very happily working with them. They've been great to work with. Working with a couple of other tribes now for various other different products and so on as well. Very excited about that. I think we've had some conversation about that and how it's kind of a nice circle to come back to the indigenous tribes to be able to have them working in the hemp industry. And we've been very happy to be working with those. On the other side, on the private side, it's just been, for instance, somebody has a farm that they can leverage to the hill to be able to do this kind of thing, or whatever the case is. Maybe not to the hilt, but some of those people they actually have relationships with bankers, and they can go to that banker and say, this is where we're at, what we're doing, this is the return. And I understand that it's marginal right now, but it's growing quickly. And this is where we see you do a business plan, you can very quickly see where this is going to go. It doesn't take much. As an economic developer, we put together tons of business plans. Most of those business plans weren't close to what we're going to be able to do with the hemp industry. So we're very excited about that and what's going to happen. It's just a matter of being able to take that next step or two to get over the hump of this new industry thing and get those finance people to talk to us a little bit more seriously.
Do you see like creating like these networks of farmers? Is it, are you finding that's what's happening? Like it's more like a network of farmers rather than just one big farm and one processing machine. What have you found, like, through who you're selling the machines to? What's their setup?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of it. It's across the board. It'll be individuals and it will be groups of individuals. In our area here, if you mention the word co-op to a farmer, they're going to cringe. It's like they hold up a cross. I don't know why, but they hate co-ops. But around the country, there are a lot of areas where co-ops are very successful. And those ideas coming into the hemp industry are working very well, where you can get a group of individuals or farmers or whatever the case is that can grow enough hemp to satisfy the production unit, whether it be CBD or for industrial. And that seems to be working out very well. I'm anxious to learn more about the PMAs, and I'm going to have to look Mike's information up after this is over. But I don't know anything about that and how it's going to affect anything.
Yeah, we did some previous conversations on the PMA with David Edwards, who Mike introduced me to, and he's part of that team, because the interest since we've had those conversations has been explosive, Mike. I mean, everybody's talking about the PMAs, the PHAs, the PEAs, but and that was why we decided to go in that direction as well, and just launching our membership. I know we're coming close up onto the hour. Maybe, River, just one last question that you have to sort of close the conversation. Appreciate this. I think this has been really informative, a different way of looking at hemp than most people who are just taking CBD are thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's my own thing as well, because I think we're all trying to figure out this. It's an unfolding process. There is no hard answers, I think, right now. There's a lot of kind of hope and looking how this can be really a positive thing. The other thing I think people have questions is like what about the seed? Like, are there other things that are creating issue to move this forward on the farming side, outside of just the processing? Like, is there specific seeds that are hard to come by, or that we would use? Like, I know Randy was saying there's the seed that we can use that would grow hemp for fiber and herd, but also has CBD in it. Is this kind of just like new, or is this common and easy to get the seeds? Oh, unmute you again.
She unmutes and I mute. Okay. Try this again. I don't think getting seed is as much of a problem as knowing what the seed does. We need to know what varieties and how varieties act and interact, and can they be planted like we're planting them, and get the true tri-crop out of them. We're doing a couple of different seed trials we're associated with this year, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 different varieties, different planting times and densities and so on, to see how they act and react in different areas, from the northern United States down to Puerto Rico. We'd like to expand that a little bit, but for this year, that's all we could put together. But we're excited about that, and I think that's something that's going to have to be figured out so that we know what varieties are right. We've talked a little bit about corn. If you look at corn, you look at a cornfield, every corn plant is the same height, and all the ears are at the same height as you harvest them. It's taken generations to do that, and quite honestly, genetics, and I'm not excited about that idea. But we need to, in some way or another, standardize the hemp industry a little bit more to the fact that a farmer knows when he plants the hemp how it's going to react in his field. Right now, I'd say half of the customers that I talk to the first time can't answer what their plants are going to look like when they're done growing. And that's a problem. That's a real problem, as you can imagine, for a lot of reasons. So I think that's probably a bigger issue as far as the seed is concerned than getting it. As we've evolved a little bit, there are a lot of farmers that are raising seed, and I think there's seed available. There are a few varieties that are a little tougher to come by. Carmagnola, for instance, is a little bit tougher to come by right now. But I think as the industry develops, I think those seed problems will go away pretty quickly.
Yeah, as long as Monsanto stays out of it and we
Exactly.
don't start engineering the crap out of this plant. Yeah, I mean, I know there's obviously a lot of stuff's gone on with working on the breeding of seeds and different stuff and cross-pollinating. I don't know enough about it, obviously. And your side of it, Mike, is that an issue? Are they kind of seed keeping on the indigenous side? Are they, because I know they're big into the seed, holding onto the seeds and the heirloom seeds, right?
So my growing partner, he actually does his own genetics, and then he designs seeds and has seeds that can be done anywhere across the country. So we have specific seeds for South Dakota that would be way different than what we're going to do in Florida and or California. So they're specifically designed to be able to weather the weather, right? And then for a short growing time in South Dakota, where you have a longer grow in either Florida or California. And then in Florida, they've been working on humidity problems, right? Fortunately, with the industrial hemp, you have a little bit different. It's a little different than with CBD hemp, because if the mold gets there, it's not going to be as devastating as if it's in a flower, right, that you're going to be using. So there's different things for different climates and locations. So but he's been able to do, every area we're looking at, he has a genetic that'll work for it. So
yeah, well, we got a new project out in Hawaii, on the island of Maui, and there's a lot of interest there, and and some of the questions are around that, because some parts of the island are subtropical, and they're asking, can I grow hemp here? Is it going to work? Is it and I think there was still some stuff that's just seems to be eluding people in terms of the exact specifications of working with the plant and growing with the plant, and I think that kind of brings us back to just education, right? I mean, it's how do we get this information out there, and I appreciate you guys we appreciate you guys coming on today, like, just to help unpack it a little bit more for people, because there's a huge interest, but there's just a lot of ignorance around it, and most people are just coming at it in terms of like, wow, this is amazing, it's a new thing, and it's there's a lot of excitement, but then as soon as they come across a hurdle, they're just devastated. And I think if we can educate people, and make them see that this is really not that complicated in a lot of respects, it's growing. It's what's inherently natural to us and our life on this planet. So really thank you guys for sharing your knowledge. Imanee, maybe you want to close? You close so well.
Yeah, I definitely want to thank both of you. I think this was a really enlightening conversation, and for everyone else tuning in to our Regeneration series podcast. If you're new to us, you can definitely follow us at havenearth.biz. We'd love for you to join and become a member of our PMA, and to continue not just learning more about hemp, but to build the future together with hemp. So thank you, Randy. Thank you, Mike. And thank you, River.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Randy.